Hello and welcome. Since today is October 31st, Halloween, let's read some stories from our /nosleep show. I fell asleep during my flight. When I woke up, everyone was gone. I've always been an extremely heavy sleeper, a fact that has greatly helped me during my frequent flights. I was making my way to Sydney to visit family, a trip that would last an entire day. Despite my easy dreams, even I needed a sleeping pill for that particular journey. Medication, combined with some music to cover up the constant noise in the cabin, would allow me to spend at least half the journey over the Pacific in a peaceful slumber. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by another passenger violently shaking me. In my groggy state, it took a while before I could even comprehend the words he was yelling at me. Once my eyes finally agreed to open, I could see that he looked absolutely horrified. They're, they're all gone. "You've got to wake up," he stuttered loudly, as he continued to shake me. Even then, it took a while before the words hit me. How could people be gone had we landed? As I tried to compute the information while turbulence shook through the plane, we definitely hadn't reached our destination. "Gone?" I asked. "What do you mean?" The man was too panicked to respond. Instead, he just kept pointing around the cabin with a shaky finger. Slowly, I got to my feet and tried to shake off the hold my sleeping medication had over me. The plane had been packed to the brim before takeoff, but now it was almost empty. There were only about 5 of us left, all equally terrified. "Cabin crew, please report to the cockpit," one of the pilots said over the speakers. I looked around the cabin. The stewardesses were nowhere in sight. Apart from the few scared passengers, the plane was completely rid of any life. We made our way to the cockpit door and used the radio to respond. "They're gone. What's going on?" I asked. "Oh God, them too?" the pilot asked back nervously. A click was heard and the door opened. Inside we found only one pilot. "You're alone?" I asked. He nodded. "We were taking shifts while on autopilot. I fell asleep. I woke up. He was just gone." From the cockpit I could get a better view of the world outside. Below us were nothing save endless sandy hills. As far as I knew, we were supposed to be crossing the Pacific Ocean, yet all we could see was the infinite desert below. Where are we? The pilot took another look at the instruments. They were filled with numbers and blinking lights I couldn't comprehend. The coordinates were last updated an hour ago. We're supposed to be in the middle of the ocean, but it just doesn't make any sense. "Have you made contact with the airport?" "No, nothing is working. I'm flying blind here with nowhere to land." The one thing I could recognize within the complicated cockpit was the fuel indicator. Though it seemed plentiful, it would eventually run out. How much fuel do we have left? We should have had more than enough to get to Sydney twice over, but I don't even know where the hell we are. The first few hours went by, and we gathered every piece of technology we had in a futile attempt at contacting the outside world. All the while, the fuel kept dripping down, a constant reminder that we were running out of time. Outside, the desert continued, only interrupted by strange rock formations. They were unnaturally spiky, extending high from the ground like razors. All we could do was to watch and hope the pilot found a safe place to put us down. After a while, the deserts and rocks gave way to a flat piece of land. The pilot looked around before finally making his destination to put the plane down. "This is the best I can do. Get ready for the landing," he said. We buckled up in the back of the plane and got ready for a rough landing. It was surprisingly gentle once we first hit the dirt, and against all odds, the brakes slowed us down without incident. It looked like we were in the clear, but then the ground below us finally gave out. The front of the plane fell into a sinkhole, which instantly crushed the cockpit and caused us to slam against our seats. It knocked me unconscious for a second, but by the time I came back to it, the cabin had filled with smoke. A couple of the passengers had their necks broken from the impact, and the pilot had been killed. The few of us left alive rushed to escape the burning wreckage, but in the chaos it was difficult to find the exit. Using the escape lights, we got to an emergency exit and jumped onto the burning hot ground below. 3 of us had survived the landing, but we weren't safe yet. It wasn't until we got away from the smoke and fire before we realized the true gravity of our situation. At the horizon in front of us stood an impossibly tall mountain range, stretching endlessly up into the sky. It was little more than barren rocks and lifeless ground, but the thing that truly horrified us was the sky above. There hung a massive blue sun that would scald our skins in minutes. We survived the landing, but it wouldn't even matter, because wherever we were, it wasn't Earth. That was the first one. Let's do this one. Yeah, this one will work. Here is the second one. A cloud of birds branded me last night. So I live in a fairly large town, not a big city by any standards. I mean, we've a main street, our own mall and movie theater, a community college, and they even put in a GAP a couple years ago. Anyway, the last couple of months I have started driving for a delivery service. I deliver anything from food and groceries to household items and clothes. It's not that bad, and I make decent spending money. I'm a full-time student, so any extra is welcome. Last night was a really clear night. The air was crisp because there had just been a rainstorm, and the weather forecast said there was more on the way. The moon was full and there was no clouds in the sky. The eye of the storm, one could say. And the stars were so beautiful. I remember the stars the most because I was sitting in my car looking through the sunroof and watching them as I waited for another order to come in. That's when I saw it. A storm cloud was gathering above me. It was very dark and seemed to be almost solid. It blackened out the stars behind it. There was billowing around, pulsating, and it must have been a strong wind up there. I remember thinking, that's one hell of a storm cloud, maybe I could call it a night. I didn't, because a minute later the cloud was gone, completely dissipated. I watched it fade away into the night, and when I could finally see the stars that were hidden behind it again, I felt a sense of relief rush over me. Another minute went by and my phone dinged with an order. I accepted it and drove to our town's only all-night liquor store and waiting for the clerk to ring up the order. Having a busy night, Anne? The clerk asked me. I felt bad for not remembering his name. I had been in here at least a few times a week for different orders, so we'd gotten used to each other. I shrugged. It's not too bad. Money's money, right? I smiled. He handed me the bag on the counter. Be careful tonight, okay? The cloud was menacing. He nodded through the front windows and out into the night. I turned, and sure enough, the cloud was back, billowing and pulsating just like before. Only now it was larger. I nodded, not making eye contact with him again because I didn't want him to see how unnerved I was. By the time I got back to the car, put the bag in the passenger seat and looked back at the cloud, it was gone again. I sighed, now a bit annoyed, although I didn't exactly understand why. I guess I still don't. I dropped off the order in a little house in the middle of town. A sweet couple answered the door. They were red-faced and were giggling as they took the order and tipped me a couple of bucks. They were clearly having a good night. I looked at my phone, 11 o'clock. I was tired and decided to call it a night. I began driving home. Now, of course, my house is in the outskirts of town. The rent is cheaper out here, and it enables me to live on my own while I study. I'm not a loner by any means, but I do enjoy my privacy and alone time. I was listening to music and I had completely forgotten about the weird cloud. There was suddenly a loud noise, like the clap of thunder and the crashing of lightning mushed together, but the sky didn't light up, and it generally didn't feel right. It scared me so much that I swear it almost drove off the road. I yelled as I slammed on the brakes. My head hit the steering wheel, sending shockwaves of pain through my body. The airbag didn't deploy, thankfully, but it still took me a while to recover. I sat in my car for a few minutes, trying to control my breathing as the familiar thumping of one of my headaches started up in my head. I got out of my car, breathing in the cold air, hoping it would dull the headache a bit. I leaned against the hood of my car, staring down at the ground. As I said, the moon was full, so it was decently bright outside, and the stars almost helped light up the surrounding area. I wasn't nervous or freaked out to be out there all alone. I felt relaxed. That's when a large shadow crossed the road in front of me. I knew it was being cast by something above me, but I was suddenly terrified. My body started to shake and my legs ached. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't make a sound. Tears filled my eyes, and this was all before I even had a chance to look up. The shadow stopped just above my car. There was a whooshing noise that seemed to follow it. I tried to run to the car door, but my legs wouldn't move. I slowly looked up into the sky. It was a cloud, larger than ever. Another large bang and the cloud lit up. It wasn't a cloud. It was a huge flock of birds. Blackbirds, hawks, crows, falcons, small finches, every type of bird I'd ever seen in the area, both wild and domesticated, were flying above me, swarming in a tight ball, their wings flapping furiously and their mouths open as if they were screaming down at me. I swear I could see their eyes boring into me, even though they were too high up for that. Then, as if a switch had been flipped on, all the noise you would expect these birds to be making suddenly filled the air around me. The sound was deafening, and the force of it knocked me into the ground. I watched as the birds swarmed overhead and began to dive towards me. I screamed in horror. I covered my ears and bowed my head, trying to protect myself. The last thing I saw were the talons of a huge raptor bearing down on me. Blackness. When I woke up, I was in my own bed. As soon as I opened my eyes, a fierce headache seared through my skull. I winced and looked around. There was nothing amiss. I was in my bed, in my pajamas, my car keys were sitting on the dresser, my purse hanging on the coat rack in the corner of the room. From my bed, I could look into the driveway. The sun was shining brightly through the window. There were fluffy white clouds in the sky, and I could see a flock of geese flying through town overhead. My car was sitting, perfectly parked, in the driveway. So it was a dream then, I sighed with relief. I'd never had a dream that real before. I got out of bed, went to the dresser, and began to brush through my sleep-tangled hair. I yelped when the brush scratched something just above my ear. I looked in the mirror, leaning close and moving as much hair as possible out of the way so I could see clearly. Just above my right ear, near my temple, was a small, crudely drawn bird carved into my skin. I know last night was real. I just don't. That is all for today. Having a little bit of fun doing some scary stories on Halloween, That's all for this morning. Hope you all have a good day, and